Cities are built on stories. Some are etched in stone and glass, monuments to ambition and progress. Others, darker and more ancient, linger in the shadows. They are whispered in hushed tones, passed down through generations like warnings. These are the tales of the underground, where concrete and steel meet something older, something hungrier. They speak of forgotten tunnels, abandoned stations, and the things that lurk within. These are the stories that draw us in, that tap into our primal fear of the unknown. They are cautionary tales, reminding us that even in the heart of civilization, darkness persists. These are the legends of the urban explorers, the graffiti artists, the MTA workers who dare to venture into the belly of the beast. These are their stories. The air hung thick and heavy with the smell of paint and fear. The rattle of a distant train echoed through the tunnel, each clang a hammer blow against Jake's raw nerves. He glanced nervously over his shoulder, his hand instinctively tightening around the can of spray paint. The train tracks, slick with dew and reflecting the dim city lights, stretched out behind him, a steel serpent winding its way into the heart of the unknown.
Come on, man, let's get out of here.
Marco's voice, usually brimming with bravado, was tight with anxiety. He was already halfway down the tunnel, his own masterpiece abandoned on the wall behind him. Jake knew they shouldn't be here, not this late, not this deep in the abandoned subway tunnels. But the thrill of the illegal, of leaving their mark on the city's underbelly, had been too strong to resist. He took one last glance at his work, a vibrant explosion of color against the grimy concrete. A shiver ran down his spine. Something wasn't right. The hair on the back of his neck prickled with a primal warning. He turned to follow Marco, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. That's when he heard it. A soft, shuffling sound, like something dragging across the concrete. Jake spun around, his blood turning to ice. A figure, tall and shrouded in shadow, stood silhouetted against the faint glow of the city lights. The figure lunged. Jake barely had time to register the glint of metal, the flash of a cruel smile, before he was running for his life. The sound of his own ragged breaths mingled with the clatter of his shoes on the metal tracks. He didn't dare look back. A gunshot echoed through the tunnel, the sound deafening in the confined space. He didn't slow down, his lungs burning, his legs screaming for respite. He didn't stop running until he burst out of the tunnel and into the relative safety of the night. The city lights a beacon in the darkness. He never looked back. He never went back. The wind screamed past Maya's ears, whipping her hair across her face as the train roared through the darkness. She clung to the ladder, her knuckles white with the strain, her heart thundering in her chest. Train hopping. It was reckless. It was dangerous. It was exhilarating. The ultimate rush for a thrill-seeker like Maya. She'd heard the stories, of course. Whispers of things lurking in the tunnels, of phantom trains and spectral passengers. But those were just stories. Tales to scare children and tourists. She refused to give them credence.
They weren't real, they couldn't be.
Tonight, however, doubt gnawed at the edges of her bravado. The tunnel seemed darker than usual, the air thick with an oppressive silence broken only by the rhythmic clatter of the train wheels. Then she saw them. Hands. Pale, skeletal hands, reaching out from the darkness between the train cars. They grasped at the air, their fingers long and bony, their touch promising a cold embrace. Maya stared, her breath catching in her throat, a scream stuck in her chest. She squeezed her eyes shut, willing the apparition away. When she opened them again, the hands were gone. Had they ever been there at all? Or were they just figments of her imagination, fueled by adrenaline and the darkness? She didn't know. But as the train emerged from the tunnel, bathed in the pale light of the moon, she couldn't shake the feeling of unseen eyes watching her, of icy fingers brushing against her skin. Old Man Henderson knew every inch of the subway system like the back of his hand. 30 years he'd spent working these tunnels, cleaning, maintaining, witnessing the ebb and flow of humanity. He'd seen it all, the good, the bad, and the downright strange. But nothing could have prepared him for what he encountered that night. It was well past midnight, the last train long gone, when he heard it. A child's cry, faint but unmistakable, echoing through the deserted station. It sent shivers down his spine. Children shouldn't be down here at this hour. He grabbed his flashlight, the beam cutting through the oppressive darkness, and followed the sound. The platform was deserted. The digital clock on the wall flickered. its numbers a stark reminder of the late hour. He swore he could still hear the faint sound of sobbing, coming from the far end of the platform, where the tunnel yawned open like a hungry maw. He shone his light down the tunnel, the beam swallowed by the darkness.
Hello?
His voice echoed back to him, distorted and hollow. He took a tentative step forward, then another, his heart pounding against his ribs. The crying grew louder now, filled with a despair that chilled him to the bone. He rounded a bend in the tunnel, expecting to find a lost child, a frightened teenager, anything but the emptiness that greeted him. There was no one there. Only the echo of his own fear, bouncing off the grimy tile walls. He backed away slowly, never taking his eyes off the spot where he'd heard the cries. He never spoke of that night, not to his co-workers, not to his family. But the memory of that child's cry, filled with a sorrow that transcended this world, stayed with him, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the city's skin.